Let's take a look at taking cuttings of dahlias to multiply the number of plants that you've got available to you for any 1 year. At the end of the year you save the tubers, dry them out, wash them, clean them and keep them frost free, and then get them going again in the spring. Now a lot of people would plant the tubers in the garden, let that shoot, and then that's one plant. By taking cuttings you can take probably a couple of dozen cuttings off each tuber and you'll have a couple of dozen individual plants that will flower later on in the year. Take for instance this one. It's Western Spanish Dancer. I've already taken a whole lot of cuttings of that. You'll see them there on the front, the ones that are already getting going. They've just got WSD on their plant labels. And those came off this plant, which left to its own devices has now produced a lot more growth that I can take more cuttings from. I probably won't bother because I've got enough plants as it is, but I'll show you how to take the cuttings. Now I mentioned that you take a nodal cutting. Now a nodal cutting is taken just below a leaf axil, so where the leaves join a stem you cut the stem just below the leaf joint, pull the leaves off and stick them in the ground and they'll root, but I'll show you that in a minute. So let's start with the compost. What are you going to use to actually root your cuttings? The important thing when taking cuttings of dahlias or any other plant is to have a very open compost. Now I always mix mine straight away, and the one I use, or what I use, is 1 part of very finely ground peat. This one actually is clover. It's a professional seed compost, so there's no nutrients in it. It's very poor as far as growing things on is concerned, but it's good for getting plants going. They don't need loads of nutrients in the soil. You should use a nutrient-free compost. So what I use is 1 part of peat compost, 1 part of vermiculite, which is mica. Some people use something else, this white stuff. That's called perlite. It does the same job, but I find that turns a bit green when you leave it open to the air. So 1 part vermiculite, and next you want some sharp sand. So 1 part sharp sand. Now that, as you can see, has got all sorts of grit and bits and pieces in it, so it's a very open compost and it will drain very freely. So give that a good mix up, and you can see that it is a very light compost. So next we'll go over to the bench and we'll put that into some cell trays. Okay, standard cell trays, they come in all sorts of different sizes. That's 5 by 4, so there's 20 cells in that one, there's 12 cells in that one, and only 9 cells in that one. And as you can see, they're a standard size so that 2 will fit into a standard seed tray. I choose personally to use the 12 cell for doing dahlias. Don't ask me why, it just looks like the right size to work with. So if we take some of this compost that we've just mixed and just shake that in, okay, spread it out so the cell tray is nice and full, and then that needs watering. So water it to settle it down, and you're going to be putting cuttings into that, so it really does need to be soaked well through. We'll water the cuttings again when we've taken them, but there we are. So one cell tray ready to go. I think a dozen's enough. I only do a few plants at the moment. Well, I've potted on 72 here, and there's another whole load in the propagator ready, but 12 seems about right. I don't want lots and lots of the same one. Some people, when they're taking cuttings, if you look at other people's videos on the internet, they'll do trays and trays of the same thing. If they're actually selling them to people or giving them away, that's absolutely fine. I don't need loads of them. The only thing I will do is to give some of these to the local Dahlia Society to sell for their proceeds, and then I'll have enough for me and my friends and my family. So we'll take some cuttings next. Okay, this is some pot tubers. There's 2 pot tubers in this pot that I bought from somebody from a sale. It's Gwyneth is the variety, and I'm going to take probably 4 or 5 cuttings off this. So I always use a scalpel, a Swan Morton scalpel that you'd use in an operating theatre, because if you're going to take a cutting, make a nice clean cut. I always remember my mother and father taking cuttings by just pinching them off with the fingernails. Well, no, let's do it cleanly and properly. So if we're going to take a nodal cutting, we cut across just below a pair of leaves, so like that. So that gives you a cutting. We want about 3 or 4 inches of growth on the top to make it handleable. Then to take the cutting, just pull the leaves off, and there you can see you've got a leaf joint, leaf axil, and there's already a couple of little shoots there, which was where flowers would come out of, and if you pinch the top out, that's where new growth would come from. So there's 1. 2. Now that's a hollow cutting. Now a lot of people just throw those away, say they're no good, you can't take cuttings. Well, I've actually rooted them, so yes, they probably don't root very well, but well, I'll stick them in, I don't mind. Okay, and we've got some more here, so there's another one. Just cut through, take the leaves off, and we'll just quickly take probably a couple more. Okay, that one's a bit small to handle, we won't bother with that today. That one's alright. So it's quite close to the tuber. Again, just cut off below the leaves and take the leaves off. And there we are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cuttings. So we'll go back to the bench and I'll show you how to plant them. Okay, so here we are on the potting bench. I've written 5 labels for the 5 cuttings, and you'll notice that on each of them I've put today's date. I've written the labels that way up because these are labels, as far as I'm concerned, are going to follow the plants right through their growing process. Then when I plant them out on the allotment, I will actually wire that label to one of the supporting canes so that it's identified. I use a good quality marker pen, an actual horticultural marker pen, so that the sun doesn't fade it, because there's nothing more annoying than wondering what something was because the ink's worn off the marker. So what do we do next? Okay, I'm going to plant 5 plants, so I use I don't know what it is actually, it's just a stick with a pointy end, so you can use the top of the hormone rooting powder. I know the jury's out as far as hormone rooting powder is concerned, whether it's good or bad or whatever. I like it, I use it, so you could use that top. So just make a shallow impression, 5 of them, so that you can plant those cuttings. Okay, they might as well go in out of the way. And now what have we got? We've got 5 cuttings of Gwyneth to go in. As I say, they were nodal cuttings taken just beneath a leaf joint. If the plant was propagated by taking an internodal cutting, you would have actually cut between 2 leaf joints, and the roots would come from the stem rather than from the leaf joint. So I'm going to use hormone rooting powder. We'll just give that a quick stir up. It's been rather well used, so it's a little bit lumpy. Then, for that to stick to the plant, my father used to just stick them in his mouth, wet it, stick it in the rooting powder and into the hole that you've already made. Be sure to tamp it down so that the potting compost is in good contact with the plant. If you don't fancy licking them, just pop them into the top of the watering can and in you go. So there's 5 of these to do. I'm going to take those off there actually, because they're a bit in the way. So if we just pop it in there and that, there we go. Now, I didn't wet that one, but you can see that it's fairly good. I'm going to wet it so that we've got enough of it on there. Pop it in. And the last one. There we go. Now, when you take cuttings, I've been gardening now for about 52 years, I suppose, on allotments, growing various bits and pieces. I haven't been growing dahlias for very long, only a couple of years. So what do I know about it? But when you look at those cuttings, there's a lot of leaf on there. Now, when I was used to grow fuchsias, I would actually take some of the leaf off because of transpiration. Now, the plant takes water in through the roots and it goes through the system, and it obviously evaporates from somewhere, so it evaporates through the leaves. So they haven't got big leaves, they can't lose as much liquid. So dahlia leaves, a lot of them, now they're not all like it, but if we take that one as an example, dahlia leaves have actually got 3 leaves on a stem. So if you take the big one off in the middle, the plant won't miss it, and it will cut down transpiration from the leaves. So if we have got just big leaves like this, what I tend to do, I know it's a bit quick and dirty, but just fold it and rip it. That's enough. The plant has got enough leaf there for it to carry on. If you want to cut it, by all means use the scalpel and mind your fingers. Okay, so if we just take that one off there and leave those 2 small ones on, and again just trim them down. So you're going to be putting these plants into a propagator, a heated propagator, set at about 20 to 21 degrees. So you don't really want them to be losing loads of water. Now, it makes the cuttings look a bit of a mess, but it doesn't matter, because when they grow on, as you can see from these, I mean, this one had a leaf cut, look, it's just carried on regardless. It really doesn't matter, and those lower leaves are going to disappear as the plant grows anyway. So that's just shown you very quickly how to take the cuttings. The next thing we'll do is go and have a look at some in the propagator. Now, there are various kinds of propagators that you can use. 2 of the different types are actually here on this bench. The old-fashioned way was a heated tray, and onto that I've put a large tray and a cover. Okay, I've had the cover off there for several days now because I don't want too much moisture in there. That's growing sweet corn, peppers, chilies, and there's some tomatoes there as well, but that's irrelevant what's in there. But that is just a separate tray. It hasn't got holes in the bottom. and the specialist and just a special top to pop over it. That was very cheap, it cost £13. This type of tray is plugged into the electricity, it's a heated bottom to it, and again with a tray to go over the top, a clear plastic tray for the top with vents. They need to be open, it's very important. And these are dahlias, they've got some bottom heat in there. These are actually some pot tubers, they're due for throwing away because there's going to be nothing more come on them. Well, there's a little one there, but it would be very difficult to propagate it. So that one is an ordinary heated one. You can't regulate the heat of that. It's either on or it's off, but as you can see it works very well for getting top growth going on tubers. Now this third type of propagator is a lot more expensive, and you can set temperatures and ventilate it very well. So you buy it as a kit, so you can either buy it sort of a small one, a large tray, which that one is. This has 2 layers on. These actually just pop on. They've got ventilators in each end, so you can actually regulate the airflow through it to prevent damping off. The lids just lift off, and again they have ventilators so that you can actually have airflow through there as well as heat at the bottom, which is important. So if I stand that out of the way. Now, why have a double height propagator? I have to say that for dahlias it's a bit of a luxury, but you'll notice that I've got other things in here. So there's a bunch of chrysanthemum cuttings going there. What are they? Energy, chrysanth energy. Oh, that's a nice yellowy white one. And of course that wouldn't go very easily into an ordinary size propagator. So let's have a look inside. Okay, this big propagator is obviously plugged into the mains. There is a thermostat on it. I'll show you that in a moment. That fits into that drops into the soil, and you can set it at whatever temperature you want. Now this one's been set at 20 degrees, but in fact you can see that it's 23.5 degrees in here today, and I think that's probably because it's sun shining. So it is very warm in here. I've kept the door closed mainly because there's so much noise outside that I wouldn't be able to make this video. But I will open the door in a bit and let the greenhouse cool down a bit. Now you can see in here there are 8 trays of 1 dozen cuttings, all with their labels, which is most important. All these cuttings I've actually managed to take and only forgotten one of them, and I have one cutting with no name. I don't know what it is, but I'll stick it in just to see what it was, and it serves me right for not remembering. So there we go, those are been in there, some of them for 2 or 3 weeks. About 3 weeks you've got good roots coming on the bottom of these trays. So there we are, those are marked the 4th of March, and as you can see the plants are really up and going quite nicely. There are some that I took just the other day, 18th of March, 16th of March, and where are we today? It's the 23rd today. So those ones that were taken the 4th of March will probably be getting on towards being able to be potted on. So I'll show you that in just a minute. This afternoon I've taken 3 trays of cuttings, so 36 cuttings in all. At the moment I've actually potted on 108 cuttings, and I've lost 7, so that's roughly a 95% success rate. But I just need to show you the thermostat on this propagator. I showed you earlier how the thermostatic control sits on the wall. That little probe fits into the soil, and that's where the whole temperature is controlled from. So I've set it at 20 degrees. It needs to be 20-21 degrees for dahlias, and that's how it's controlled. And you'll see that there are vents on each end, and of course in the lid that you saw earlier. Now those are important because at the stage you've put cuttings like this in to grow roots, they need to be kept fairly moist, but they don't need to be too wet, otherwise they'll go black and damp off. They'll rot, in other words. So it's important that you've got plenty of airflow around them while you're still keeping them warm. Now the other types of propagator, when I put cuttings into those, I was losing one or two through going black. They were damping off, rotting. So what I did to fix that problem was took the clear lids off the propagators, and that did the job. Enough airflow around, and the bottom of the plants were kept warm. Right, so let's pot some cuttings on. Compost is a good quality general purpose compost. A lot of the compost that's sold these days has green bin rubbish, you know, when you put all your weeds in the green bin and the council come and take them away and compost them. Well, our government seems to think that we don't mind having rubbish in our compost, so they've encouraged sellers to put green bin rubbish in some of the compost. I don't want it, so I pay extra for a decent compost that has nothing in. This one is Humax Original. Now Humax do make one with bin rubbish in, and you'll find it's got loads of flowers on the bag and so on, and it is quite cheap. This one is the original compost, which does not. It has a bit of sand in it, a little bit of nutrient, and it's just one that I like. I don't want bin rubbish, so I pay a bit more for my compost. So I use square pots for my cuttings. It's only because I don't have a lot of space, therefore they fit together very nicely. Round ones leave a lot of unused space on your greenhouse benches, so I use square pots. It's just open to preference, it really doesn't matter. So, small amount of compost into the pot to begin with. Now I've put 3 pots there, and I'm going to do that back 3 plants. They all happen to be Carol Spanish Dancer, and as you can see the tray is quite nice, everything's going. I've got doubts about this one at the front, but normally when you turn them over and you know they're ready for potting, you'll see that there's the odd root coming through. Unfortunately I made a mistake and put it down on some vermiculite, so you can't see whether there's any roots there or not, but I'll show you. So we're going to do those 3 across the back. We can take the labels out. They were all done on the 28th of February, so it doesn't matter which one goes back in which. So just tilt it over and you should be able to just ease the cutting out of the plant. Now you can see that's only been in that compost for 23 days, just over 3 weeks, and you can see the way that that's rooted. Absolutely lovely. The one at the front there I think is going to have hardly any roots, but it's obviously going because the leaves are nice and green. It's not died. This one's got a bit of a tatty leaf on, so we'll just throw that out. So into the compost, make sure all the roots are in. If you can put them in without breaking them up like I just did there, all the better. Least disturbance the better. So a bit more compost around the top. Stick it out the way. Let's do the next 2 very quickly. Western Spanish Dancer and Carol Spanish Dancer seem to root very well, very easily, very quickly, and with a good root ball. So if we just pop that one in, and let's see whether number 3's any good. Yes, plenty of roots on that as well. I mean, absolutely fine. That's just 3 weeks of growth, so loads of roots to get going with. So just put as much of the original potting compost, this stuff that's got vermiculite and peat and so on in it, as will come out. I mean, don't worry if you leave half of it behind, you will very regularly, but just the least disturbance possible to the roots of the plant. I mean, it's made a good start, let's not disturb it. So a bit more on the top. Looks good. Before you forget, stick the labels back in, because one thing with dahlias, they all look the same. And there we go. They look alright, and they'll get going very well, I've no doubt. The only thing that's left to do with those is to water them. Now, I was talking about transpiration. I tend to come in here and water every day. I mean, I haven't done it today, but you can see that they do dry out. That one's dried out quite a bit. It'll be all right, but it's best just not to let things dry out. So there we are. That was a cutting taken on the 24th of February. It's now the 23rd of March, so it's just a month old. No roots coming through on that yet, but I bet if I pick one of these ones up that's been going in February, there you go. That's been going since the 11th of February, and you can see the top growth is lovely and there's plenty of roots coming through. Now, at the moment these are in gravel trays. I'm going to actually change that to a fabric finish to put in there, because I don't like the way that the roots pick up pebbles and any bits and pieces of compost that have fallen in there, and when you try and repot them further on, obviously you break the roots off and so on. So I'll just show you potting them on a little bit further than that. So here's another 3 dozen cuttings potted up, and I just wanted to show you this. Here's one of Sir Alf Ramsey, and if you notice, it's got a very, very poor root structure. Sometimes when you take a cutting, the stem of the plant is hollow. Now, quite a lot of growers advocate that you cannot root hollow stems. Well, I took 3 Sir Alf Ramsey cuttings because, well, that's all I'd got, and they were all hollow, so I thought, well, nothing ventured, I'll put them in. But as you can see, that is the only one that's any good out of the 3, and the root structure is absolutely terrible. It'll grow on, it'll be fine, but that's a 30% success rate. So if you're thinking of taking cuttings, if it's really one that you haven't got any of or many of, then it might be worth a go, but that little experiment showed only a 30% success rate. Right, so potting on the cuttings. Again, I use a square pot, only because I don't have a lot of space, so I want them to fit together on the bench. Now, these are 13 centimetre square pots, 13 by 13 by 13 deep. That's about 6 inches. If you look for them, if you can find somewhere that actually sells them, you'll find that the next size up is something like 15 centimetres, but they're about double the price. So being tight-fisted, 13 by 13 by 13, it's quite big enough to grow the plant on to a stage where you could plant it out in the garden. You'll see that these are commercial pots, in that they've got a space there for a slot there for putting a label through. In a nursery, okay, that would force through. If you wish to, you could do that. It will force through anyway. If you wish to, you could use that. But these square pots, I'll take these up to my allotment and pop them in the polytunnel so that the plants can grow on in there and won't be in my way down here in the greenhouse at home. So you could use the good old Humax general purpose compost here, but what I'm going to do is to use another professional mix that I like particularly. It's Levington's M3 and it's called pot and bedding compost. Now there's enough nutrient in this compost to keep the plants going for about 3 months. So it's March now, we go to April, we go to May, so it's going to feed the plant until they can be planted out on the beds on the allotment or in the garden or wherever you're going to put them. So this will give them a flying start. It's quite an open mix, but you'll find that it's got a wetting agent in it, so that when you wet it, the water doesn't rub off, just doesn't run off, should I say. And you can see that it's fairly well ground peat, and so on. I think it is pretty well all peat. So I'm sorry for those of you who don't like using unsustainable compost, but there we are. So put some in, and we're going to, this is Hillcrest Candy. I'm going to pop that. Now that's got super roots out of the bottom. I've put plenty of compost in there. Just make a hole in the middle with your hand, because you're going to try and drop the whole of this plant in. Now when I'm potting on, I don't water beforehand. If you water beforehand, the compost tries to stay in the pot and it all gets a bit messy and you drop stuff everywhere. Whereas when it's fairly dry, all you need to do is just ease the pot slightly and you'll be able to pull that out, and you can see all the roots are going up inside the pot. I haven't broken any of them off. And that root ball has stayed together. Okay, we don't want it breaking up, we don't want to disturb the roots, we want it to grow on as well as it can, so let's encourage it. So that's got a mixture of potting compost in it. You can see, oh, there's some perlite there. I must have obviously used some perlite early on. Perlite, it's got the original compost that I used to strike the cutting. That Humax compost is in there, and now just pop the whole thing into that indentation that you made, and then we'll top off with some more M3. Now that is going to need a jolly good watering. Now as you can see, when I said about the wetting agent in it, it allows the water to go down through the compost instead of laying on the top in a puddle and leaving the roots dry. So just give it a good drink, and then I'll take it over and put it on the bench over on the other side, and then later on this afternoon I'll water it again. It's fairly free draining compost. It won't stop as a pudding. It will let the water run straight through. Well, you can see that is already dripping through, so it's probably wet enough. Now, having potted it onto that stage, the plant's going to grow on very well. If I pick up one of these other ones over here, that one in particular, alright, that one's Carol Spanish Dancer again. I said that they grow on and root fairly well. That's one from the 11th of February, so it's just over a month old, about 5 weeks old. Again, roots are growing well out of the bottom. When you pot them on into that stage there, we don't actually want to plant them out until about May. So I don't grow dahlias for showing specifically. I mean, that is a science I don't really want to get into. I want them as cut flowers, and if I happen to have some that I can put into our local allotments show, that would be fine. But as you can see there, that cutting that's only 5 weeks old has got enough growth to take a nodal cutting again. So you could actually multiply your stock even more, with even more plants if you wish to. I mean, the plant will need stopping out because otherwise it'll just go up and up and up. So if it's one that you want to have plenty of plants of, you can cut that off again with a scalpel and root that, and away you'll go. I don't want any more, but I will probably cut that, take the middle out of that at some stage. If I show you on the other bench, the ones that I've already taken earlier this week, you'll see what I mean. Right, so here are a few plants that have been potted on into 6-inch pots. You can see that I've been a bit greedy with these, in that I've taken cuttings of those: Barberry Flare, Barberry Drum, Barberry Alex. I've taken cuttings from them. They really just to see how we go on with them. As you can see, I hope you can see, where the cutting was taken from, it was actually a hollow stem. Now, some people advocate that you can't take cuttings with hollow stems. Jury's out as far as I'm concerned. I've had a go. But what will happen with those, now that I've taken cuttings from those plants, is I've got another cutting going in my trays over there, and this plant will grow on. It'll shoot from the leaf axils and will get going. Here's an example of Pasodoble, which hasn't been snipped out in the middle yet, and that was virtually what those other ones look like. So there we go. That's the state of cuttings as far as I'm concerned. These plants can stay in these 6-inch pots right until they get planted out. If they do start to get a bit root bound, I'll probably have to go up a layer, to another level of pot, another size of pot, but we'll see. If I want to keep some pot tubers for next year, that is, not plant them out into a flowering spot on the allotment, I'll leave them in these pots to create small tubers that we can use for cuttings next year. You don't need to plant the plants out for them to produce tubers. They will produce a small set of tubers in a pot of this size. So there we are. That's very quickly how you take dahlia cuttings.